Okay, looks like we're starting to get some people joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody this fine Friday. If it's Friday for you, we're excited to have you for another Leader Factor webinar. We'll wait just a couple minutes as people start filling in here. Looks like we're going to have a good audience today, and we're very excited that you've decided to spend some time with us. First thing that I would love to see is in the chat, if you can hear me and you can see me and you can see the slides, go ahead and put a yes in the chat. Beautiful. Next thing I would love to see in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing something meaningful that happened to you this week. That's always a great way to start these webinars. We've done it the last time or two. Always enjoy seeing that. So if you want to put your location, something meaningful that happened to you. Hey, today is Ben's wife's birthday. Excellent. Happy birthday.
True.
That is true. So you'll see that Ben is going to be moderating the chat today. Ben is a member of our team here at Leader Factor. So let's get a happy birthday in the chat to Ben's wife. I think she might even be on. Good morning from Mexico. Keith kicked off 31 days of Halloween. Oh man, the chat's moving too fast. I can't even keep up with these.
Man. Slow down, guys.
Colombia. I was accepted to my Dream Masters program. Becca Smith, congratulations.
Fantastic.
That's a big deal. Oh, we got a lot of happy birthdays in here. We got like 100 happy birthdays. So Alex, if you're listening to this, happy birthday. Chicago, working on moving to a new house. Cheryl, congratulations. David Boyce in Idaho cut down a 120-foot tall tree. I've never done that. 120 feet.
Only in Idaho.
Only in Idaho.
Yeah.
They don't make them like that anywhere else.
That's fantastic.
Holy smokes. That's fantastic. Excellent. Looks like we got a lot of locations today as well. Marcia, connected with a good friend this week. Thomas from Switzerland, welcome. Excellent. It looks like we'll have a few people trickling in, but we probably have the majority of our audience joined today. So for those of you who didn't hear the first time, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you taking time on your Friday to spend some time with us to talk about psychological safety. I imagine that many of you have attended Leader Factor webinars in the past, so welcome back. If it's your first time, welcome. Today, our host is Dr. Timothy Clark. He is the CEO and founder of Leader Factor. He's an Oxford-trained social scientist who's been doing instrument design for several decades. He's the author of the book, The 4 Stages of Psychological Safety, which I have right here. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read this book, we highly recommend it. It's an easy read. You'll see it's not super thick, less than 200 pages. And it's becoming extremely popular. We invite you to read it. We would also invite you to do us a favor. If you've read the book and you would be willing to, please leave us a review on Amazon. That helps spread the news of psychological safety, and we very much appreciate that. So if you wouldn't mind, if you have read the book, go and leave us a review on Amazon. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you don't have the book, go ahead and pick up a copy. Ben, if you'll put a link to the book in the chat, that would be fantastic so people can take a look. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a very exciting topic. We're going to be talking about not just the 4 stages model, but 2 very specific pieces of the 4 stages model that we really haven't talked a lot about that are very important and I think will resonate with many of you. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Tim, to tell us about our agenda and what we're going to be doing today.
Right. So thanks, Junior. So today we'll review the 4 stages, which many of you are familiar with. We won't spend a lot of time on that. And then we're going to dedicate really the major portion of our time today to 2 failure patterns that we see in organizations, in organizational culture and team culture. And these failure patterns are paternalism and exploitation. We're going to define both of those patterns, and we're going to talk about how they work and what they look like and how you avoid those. And I think what you'll find is that you're familiar with these patterns because we all are. It's part of organizational life, but we're trying to root them out as much as we can. So let's get started, and we'll start with, I want to ask you a question to kick us off, and I want to step back, and we're going to be interactive, and though we're a big audience, we can still be interactive using the chat box. So I really want you to do that very liberally, join in our discussion. I want you to step back and think about what people do in organizations. And when I say organizations, I mean any kind of organization. It could be a work organization. It could be an educational institution. So it could be work, school, an athletic team, a social club, anything. What are the main activities that people do in organizations? If you were to put them in categories, they interact, okay? So Junior, help us out here.
Brian says make decisions. Lacey Lynn, sorry, I hope I got your name right. Work, learn, interact, and communicate. Jenny, problem solving. We've got, sometimes hard to keep up with this chat, guys. Fran says collaborate. Barba says collaborate. We got a lot of collaborate.
Relate, produce, co-create, build relationships, socialize, innovate. Okay. Now, do you see the patterns? So one of the things that I stress with all of you is that we are in the pattern recognition business. That's what we do. And you do too. I'm including you in this. We're in the pattern recognition business. So can you see just very quickly that there are themes here? There are very common activities or categories of activities that we engage in organizations, right? So I want you to think about that. Now, we could use different words, different terminology to classify these activities, but we do a lot of the same things in organizations. Let me tell you a little bit about how the 4 stages of psychological safety research started. We began with this question in mind. What do people do in organizations? What are the common activities, the common categories of activity that people engage in? And what we noticed is that one was that we interact socially. We connect, we build relationships, and that was one. Does that make sense? Regardless of the type of organization, there's a category of activity where we are interacting, we're socializing, we're connecting, we're building relationships. That's what we're doing. So that's one. Another bucket of activity was that we're learning and we're growing and we're developing. Doesn't matter the type of organization, but we are acquiring new knowledge and skills and experience and competency. So that was kind of the learning bucket. So we have the connecting bucket that includes all aspects of social interaction for the sake of interaction. And then we have the learning bucket for growth and development. Okay. And then we had a third bucket, which was the bucket of contributing to the value creation process. So it's contributing. So we called it the contributing bucket. So people are helping to create the value that we create in the organization, whatever it is, whatever that bucket is. Maybe it's the street taco truck around the corner, or maybe it's a multinational corporation, whatever it is. Maybe it's a religious organization. Maybe it's an athletic team. Maybe it's a school classroom. Maybe it's a book club, whatever it is. As a member of the organization, there's this bucket of activity, which is to contribute to the purpose of the organization and the value that that organization provides. So that was the contributing bucket. And then the last bucket that we identified was the bucket of changing the organization, improving the organization, evolving the organization, adapting. So those were the four main buckets that we identified. Now you could probably give them different names. You may even change the classification, but you can see that there are these common categories of activity that we engage in. Okay, so let's ask a couple of polling questions that I think you're going to find really interesting. So let's begin with the first polling question.
Let's
Junior,
do it.
can you bring that down for us? Okay.
You bet. Should be on your screen, guys. And make sure to answer in the poll itself, not in the chat.
Okay,
Poll.
now I'm going to use the language of the four stages of psychological safety. And I want you to answer this question. In a team setting, which of these four activities do most team members want to do first? Now, what are we looking for? We're looking for the dominant pattern. Are there some exceptions? Yeah, there's some exceptions. But what do most people want to do first?
I'll give you guys about 15 more seconds, so get your answers in.
Okay.
We got a lot in there already.
Outliers. There will be some exceptions,
Yeah.
but we're trying to get the pattern across the world, the universal pattern that cuts across nations, cultures, and demographics.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this, and it looks like we're all pretty much in agreement here. Let me share the results.
Yep.
Okay, so it looks like we've got connect with other team members as the faraway winner at 71% of the votes.
Okay, so I want you to think about this, everybody. This is the dominant pattern, and what your survey results have done is they confirm the empirical pattern that we are finding across the world. This is what most people want to do first. Now, there will be some exceptions, and you can see it in the data right now. There's some exceptions. Some people, maybe they don't care about connecting with other team members for whatever reason, but we're interested in the dominant pattern of most people. What is the universal pattern? And it's reflected in these data. So this is very accurate because we've run this question again and again and again.
I think one of the things that's so interesting about this is the results to this poll are culturally agnostic. It doesn't matter where you come from. It does not matter how you were socialized. It does not matter all of these other variables that we could consider. This is a description of the universal human condition. We as humans, right? Not me as an American, not me as a consultant, not me as any other distinguishing characteristic. Junior as a human prefers in most situations to connect with other people when I enter a new situation. I think that is just fascinating because the data truly is global from all of the research that we've done. And overwhelmingly people say, I'd like to connect with people first.
So look, Junior, great point. Look at Nancy. Nancy, thank you for your point on the chat. She says, this is why onboarding is so incredibly important in an organization.
Okay.
Is that not true?
Very true.
And by the way, let me give you a global best practice for onboarding. When you onboard a new person into the organization, have you ever traveled to a new city and they have these hop on, hop off buses? Have you ever done that? So I've taken my family to, I think we did it in Paris. I think we did it in a few cities where we get on the bus, we go to a site, some kind of tourist site. We get off the bus, we spend a little bit of time, we get back on the bus. It's called the hop on, hop off bus. So a global best practice for onboarding is to do hop on, hop off interviews, where if you have a new member of the organization, you assign that member a mentor or just a friend or a host. You can call them a host. And the host takes the individual around and does very quick hop on, hop off greetings, interviews, discussions, conversations with people in the organization. And the reason you do that is you want to accelerate the normal rate of social interaction.
Yeah.
You want to accelerate the normal rate of integration into the organization. Why would you want to do this? Look at the data, right?
Yep, the data is clear. Also, I want to call out another comment from Brad. Onboarding does not have a finish line. It
Good
is an
point.
ongoing and evolving process in order to keep those social connections. So true. Could not agree more. And
Yeah.
it's something that we fail with probably more often than not. If we do onboarding in a meaningful way at all, it's
Yeah.
often not an ongoing and evolutionary process, which it absolutely needs to be.
Very, very true. Okay.
These are good comments, guys. Keep them coming in.
Okay, great. All right. So let's go to the next polling question, Junior, if we could.
Yep. Let me get her launched here.
Here's the
Okay,
next question. In a team setting, which of these four activities, and by the way, we're talking about the same four activities, which of these four activities is the highest risk? What's the highest risk? And again, we're looking for the dominant pattern, the universal pattern across nations, cultures, and demographics. What's the highest risk activity of these four activities?
I'll give you 10 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, risk to the person doing the action.
Yeah, that's right. Risk to the person engaging in the action.
All right, I'm going to share the results.
Okay. There we go.
There we go. So this one is even more overwhelmingly obvious than the previous one. Challenge the status quo at 88%.
Yeah. Now, of course, there will be some exceptions, and some people might not feel that way. Some occasionally you'll find people who just muscle through the fear of challenging the status quo, and they don't really care, and that's fine. But they are the exception.
Yeah.
That's not how most people behave.
Yeah.
Most people find challenging the status quo to be a formidable thing to do, a scary thing to do, right? So what does this help us understand? It helps us understand that the concept of psychological safety is a concept in which we climb a ladder of vulnerability. It's a lot easier for most people, as the data reflects right here. It's a lot easier for most people to do the other activities first. It's easier for them to connect with others or learn or contribute. But challenging the status quo, that's a different matter. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So again, we look at the data, look at the patterns, and there are other there are other questions that we could ask, but we won't ask those now. Okay, so let's keep going. So Junior, why don't we take that poll away? And we will press forward. Okay. Okay, so here's our definition of psychological safety, and many of you know this already. Psychological safety means that you can do these four things that we've talked about. You can feel included through connecting. You can learn. You can feel safe to contribute, and you can feel safe to challenge the status quo. And you can do those things, those four things, without feeling embarrassed or marginalized or punished in some way. But as the data shows us, these activities are not created equally, at least in most people's minds and hearts. They're not equal in terms of the level of vulnerability that is embedded in these activities. So psychological safety means that it's not expensive to be yourself, but it depends on what you are trying to do and who you are. So here's a graphic portrayal of these four stages. And you can see that the four stages, that psychological safety as a concept is a function of two things: respect on the vertical axis and permission on the horizontal axis. So the confluence of these two dimensions gives us a certain level of psychological safety. Could be low, could be high. But based on the sequence of human needs for most people, now there may be some exceptions, right? As you showed us in the data, for most people, inclusion comes first. That means they need safety to engage in in social interaction to begin with. So this is the foundation because it's the first stage in the sequence. This is what needs to be protected. We need psychological safety to engage in this activity first. Then we go to learning. And the reason that learning comes next is when you go into a new organization or social unit of any kind, typically you have to learn before you can contribute. So there's a natural sequence there. Now, are there exceptions to that? Yes. For example, what if you come into, and I think Mark Botros, who's on the webinar today, he and I had a conversation the other day, and I think we talked about this. What if you come into a team and you're an expert already, and they brought you in as an expert because they know you're an expert and they want you to contribute as an expert? That happens. And so you can hit the ground running and you'll be able to contribute right away. Now, will you continue to learn? Yes. But it won't be this discrete linear process where I learn and then I contribute. You're already ready to contribute because you're an expert. So you'll see that stage 2 and stage 3, they start to interact in a cyclical way once you become competent in what you do. But the learning never stops, right? And the contribution never stops. So those are stages 2 and 3. And then we finally get to stage 4, challenger safety. And why is challenger safety at the top? Because it represents the highest level of vulnerability and personal exposure. It's the hardest act of vulnerability to engage in. And it's the top of that ladder. It's the last rung in that ladder of vulnerability. Now, for some people, and this is the other interesting thing about challenging the status quo, for some people, it's pretty natural. Maybe they were socialized that way. Maybe they were socialized to have a healthy disrespect for the status quo. But a lot of people were not socialized to have a healthy disrespect for the status quo. In fact, they were socialized in quite the opposite way, that they should not challenge the status quo. So let me ask you a question. I want you to think about the way that you have been socialized professionally at the beginning of your career, not now, at the beginning of your career. And I want you to go to the chat box and I want you to answer this question. Were you socialized to challenge the status quo or not challenge the status quo at the beginning of your career? What do you got?
While those chats are coming in, I want to call out 2 comments. You guys always seem to be able to put a few things succinctly every webinar. So David says, even experts need to learn context and culture, right?
That's right.
And then Matt says after that, contributing is 2 parts. 1, can you do the task? 2, and can you do it here? Even a new expert has to learn the second part.
What a beautiful insight.
Love it, Matt. That's fantastic.
What a beautiful insight.
Very well said.
Yeah, so no matter where you are, you have to come up to speed on culture and context. Yeah. And then I love Matt's point. Can you be successful contributing here? Not somewhere else, not where you were before, but here. Okay. Those are excellent insights.
And I've felt that before when I've been brought in to give an opinion or to put something into place or to do some initiative. There's always that initial jolt of, oh, I got to figure out what's going on here. I need to learn the context. I need to learn the social dynamics.
Yeah.
Right.
So listen to this, Junior. Listen to this comment from Jewel. She says, as an Asian woman, I was expected to toe the line and not challenge. Mm. And that really reminds me of, we did a certification this week and we had women. It was primarily women, and we had women from Europe. We had women from Asia. We had women from other parts of the world. And we were talking about this gender-based difference, which does come up in the empirical research in some places where there is a gender-based difference. And so we have to acknowledge that in some cases. It's very
Absolutely.
real. Okay. Okay, fantastic. So think about, hopefully you're starting to think about the 4 stages and glean some new insights. Okay, so inclusion safety, I want to take you through the social exchanges very quickly, and then we're going to get to paternalism and exploitation. So inclusion safety means that you come into an organization or a team or a social unit, you feel included, you feel accepted, you feel a sense of belonging, right? What is the social exchange? How does it work? It's actually very simple. For stage 1, inclusion safety, the exchange is, if I come to the new organization, I just have to be human and I have to be harmless. In other words, I don't come with the threat of harm. And if I can do those 2 things, which shouldn't be too hard, then the organization is obligated, morally obligated to include me. Why? Because there's no way that you can justify exclusion on the basis of any demographic or psychographic characteristic. You just can't do it. And so if you're human and you're harmless, then we are obligated to invite you into our society. One of the examples that I give in the book, guys, and some of you've read it, is that, when I was young, when I was a child, we lived in Durango, Colorado. I lived with my parents there, and my father was a teacher among the Navajo. And if you don't know, the Navajo represent the 2nd largest Native American tribe, second only to the Cherokee. And so I grew up as a child surrounded by Navajo, living in the Navajo community. I perceived the differences. I was not Navajo. I did not speak Navajo. There were so many differences in culture and custom, but in spite of all the differences, they invited us into their society. They included us. Now, does it make all the differences go away? No, that's not what we're talking about here. But they were inclusive. They gave us inclusion safety. And then we still maintain these beautiful differences that we had. So many of you have probably had a similar experience. So it doesn't make the differences go away. In fact, that's not the goal. The goal is to acknowledge common humanity, and then we invite each other into our respective societies. So that's the social exchange.
Sue says consultants are not harmless. Oh man.
So how do you increase this inclusion safety? I'll give you one kind of a summary recommendation. Engage in behaviors in which you are asking, inviting, and sharing. That's what you do. And that will give you momentum to accelerate the inclusion safety on a team. Asking, inviting, and sharing behaviors. Okay, here's stage 2, learner safety. So what's the social exchange? Okay, it's a little different here. The social exchange is that if I come into a new team, my obligation is to engage in the learning process. The team's obligation is to encourage me in that learning process. Does that make sense? Encouragement to learn in exchange for engagement to learn. Now, here's a question. Who goes first? Does one party or the other, does the individual or the team have an obligation, have a responsibility to go first? Have you ever thought about that? Who goes first and why? Go to your chat box and answer that question. Give us your perspective on that question. We've tried to understand this better than we've understood in the past.
Team, leader, people in the position of power go first.
Okay, that's right.
People managers. You guys are right on the money here.
Okay, why?
Yeah,
why does the team go first?
Throw some whys in the chat. Why should I, as a manager, go first? Role model
the leader of the team, the first mover. Why do you need to be the first mover if you're the leader or the team?
Christine says set precedent.
Okay.
Leader first, but always acknowledge when someone takes the initiative. Model the behavior, power dynamics to create comfort.
Create comfort, set the tone, inspire a shared vision.
Take the
Fantastic.
initial risks. These are good.
Fantastic.
These are good.
Yeah. Yeah. Lower the
Let me
risk.
let me make a point. Why,
Yeah.
why would I, perhaps as learner, be reticent to engage in the learning process first? Because the learning process poses some inherent risk for me. And I've seen this personally, and you probably all have too. When you go into a new setting, there's some friction at the very beginning about asking questions. You're not quite sure. You might be a little bit hesitant, and you may not be confident, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big piece of this. And so I
Yeah.
think that you are all very much correct, and we agree with you
Yeah. We
in
do.
that the manager needs to extend the hand first. The manager needs to give the encouragement, whoever's in that place of positional power.
That's right. We all bring, as Junior said, we all bring some inhibition and some fear to the learning process. The learning process is a process that is fraught with fear. Now, you may feel a little bit or a lot, but still, you're going to bring some level of inhibition to that learning process. Also, what if you just, what if it's not fear so much, but what if you just don't have confidence?
Yeah.
One of the examples that I give in the book is that a student drops out of high school in the United States every 26 seconds. That just blew my mind when I learned of this statistic. And then as we did further research, we figured out that most of these students who are dropping out, they have the intellectual capacity to do the academic work. Why are they dropping out? They're dropping out because the learning process is not just intellectual, it's emotional too. And they are emotionally bruised. They're emotionally bruised learners. They don't feel the love, the encouragement, the guidance. So they lose confidence and call it quits. That's a tragedy. So an emotionally bruised learner. So let me just summarize this principle. An emotionally bruised learner is a cognitively impaired learner. You're not going to learn as well, right? Because you're emotionally bruised. You're not going to learn as effectively. And that is absolutely true. And it doesn't matter the cohort. This is true for children. It's true for adolescents. It's true for adults. And it doesn't, this principle is still relevant when you're in a professional environment. So encouragement to learn in exchange for engagement to learn. And who goes first? The leader in the organization. You have a first mover responsibility. Okay, so what do we do? How do we improve learner safety? Number one, model the vulnerability in the learning process. As a leader, you're not supposed to have all the answers. Please don't model the leader as Oracle, that imperial model of leadership from the Industrial Revolution. Please retire that. It's not going to be very effective in this new decade anyway. So model the learner that asks the questions, that gives and receives feedback, right? That experiments, that makes mistakes, and publish your mistakes and publish your I don't knows. It's a beautiful thing. It's so disarming. It's so refreshing when you have a leader that says, man, I don't know. What do you think? Number one, model, right?
Maria's comments getting a lot of love in the chat, and she makes the point that value creation on the team doesn't come from knowing but learning. And if the leader can model that goodness, that team is going to be a high performing team, high learning
really
team.
True. That's really true. I love the distinction between knowing and learning.
Yep.
And the value comes out of the learning because it's ongoing, isn't it?
There's nothing
static about it.
When you are in a position of leadership, you need to think about what you reward, right? Yeah. How do you reward knowing and how do you reward learning? Because often I think there's a failure to not recognize the learning and absolutely recognize the knowing. And if you just reinforce the knowing and, hey, thank you for knowing that already, and thank you for performing without asking questions, then you can really stifle that learning culture and suffocate it. And that becomes a dangerous thing.
Well, to your point, Junior, what about encouraging and rewarding when the members of your team say, I don't know?
Yeah.
And you say, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
Thank you for acknowledging that. And that's where we are. And guess what? I don't know either. So let's pursue this.
Yeah.
And so you're rewarding that behavior. You're even rewarding not knowing. And then let's get to work and learn together.
And to your previous point, sharing what you don't know and sharing when you learn. If you can come to the team in a position of power as a leader and say, guess what? I should have known this a long time ago. I just learned this, right? Yeah. To show, okay, he has some learning risk too. He feels a little bit uncomfortable too. He still has things to learn. I think it's
very
important.
True. So number one, model. Number two, encourage. Number three, protect. Protect people in the learning process. If they feel embarrassed or marginalized or harshly criticized in that learning process, what are they going to do? Withdraw, recoil, manage personal risk.
Yeah.
Okay. So stage three, okay, what's the social exchange in stage three? It changes again. Here it is. The social exchange is that the team will give you autonomy, a measure of autonomy, with guidance in exchange for results. So can you see that as we move up the stages of psychological safety, there's more performance required. So it becomes more performance-based, right? Now, it's interesting because most people want autonomy. Now, but they need some guidance with it, right? It can't just be autonomy without any guidance or direction. So it's got to be autonomy with guidance in exchange for results. So we have to deliver the results. That's our responsibility, and we're all accountable. And accountability is a beautiful thing. You can't feel good about yourself unless you're accountable and you're producing something of value. And then we find deep satisfaction in what we're doing. So that's the exchange. Autonomy with guidance in exchange for results. Okay, let's keep going. So how do you do this? There's a pretty, I would say, identifiable, consistent pattern here. And here's what it is. 3 parts. Explain the why. The why taps motivation. People want to know the why. When they know the why, it propels them forward. They get motivated. They get energized. So number 1, explain the why. Why are we doing this? Why do we need to do this? Number 2, assign the what. So we divide up work into tasks, and you do this, and I'll do this, and you do this. So we assign the what. And then the third part is delegate the how as much as possible. Now, we often have responsibilities to manage risk, so you can't just delegate all of it without any guidance or direction. You have to be wise and prudent and use good judgment. But when we delegate the how, that's the exciting part. If you're on the receiving end of that and you're empowered to do something, right? But they don't tell you exactly how to do it. It may cause some anxiety on the one hand, but you have creative license. You have ownership. You get to independently figure out how to do it. And that's what most people want. Now, again, we're looking for the dominant pattern. Some people are perhaps so risk averse that they don't want that. And they want you to tell them exactly how to do something. That's right. And we know that pattern exists, but we want to try to avoid that. We want people to have a big figure it out factor in something that has been delegated to them. Yeah.
And one of the failure patterns that we see is that people miss explaining the why. Okay, that doesn't happen. They assign the what and then they micromanage the how, right? That's the failure pattern that we see all the time. And so just note that is what not to do. And that is usually what happens in a common failure pattern. So let's get on to the next one.
Okay, let's do it. So here we go. Stage 4, challenger safety, social exchange. Here's the social exchange. Air cover in exchange for candor. Now think about that, right? So stage 4 means that we feel safe to be able to challenge the status quo. And we're not going to jeopardize our personal standing or reputation. What do you need to be able to challenge the status quo, to be able to engage in that kind of candor? That means that the environment, the conditions, the culture, they need to accommodate or tolerate that candor. That's air cover. That's the protection that I need to engage in the candor. If you come to me, or Junior, if I go to you and I say, Junior, I want your candid feedback, by golly, right? But
Yep.
I don't give you air cover, what are you going to do?
I'm going to say kick rocks. There's no way,
Yeah.
right? I'm not going to tell you that, but I'm going to soften it, right? I'm going to withhold. I'm going to keep it close to me. There's no way that I'm going to come to you with my candid feedback because there's so much personal risk for me. And I bet there are people on this webinar today that have said, okay, you want my candid feedback? I'll give it to you. And then guess what happened? They paid a price.
That's right.
Right? In an unhealthy environment, they probably paid a price. And guess what happened after that? They didn't do it again.
No, they get wise.
Yeah.
And so what happens in organizations, if you don't have the air cover, what happens in a meeting? The meeting becomes what?
What do you guys think? Put it in the chat. What happens?
What happens in a meeting where you're really trying to address tough issues, solve problems, but if the air cover is not there, what happens in a meeting?
Everyone shuts up. That's about as simple as you can put it. There it is. Clam up, get tense.
I love that. Soliloquy. It turns into a soliloquy.
It does. Crickets.
Crickets, yeah. Stagnant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is these response patterns are perfectly reasonable response patterns.
Yeah.
If the air cover's not there, then the meeting isn't the meeting, is it? Now, are people, so let me ask you this question. So people don't talk in the meeting, right? It's crickets in the meeting. What happens after the meeting?
Another meeting.
Another meeting.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. The real meeting.
I just wanted to acknowledge that. The real meeting happens after the formally scheduled official meeting.
The water
The
cooler.
meeting is going to happen. That's
Yeah.
what we all need to understand. The meeting is going to happen. And it may be several smaller meetings, but the meeting is going to happen. It may be more informal, but it's going to happen. That's what we all need to understand. The meeting will happen. It's just a matter of, does it happen in the room when we want it to happen? It's going to happen.
Brian Johnson, and there was probably a pre-meeting before the meeting.
That's right. That's right.
We got like 7 meetings.
That's right. That's exactly what happens. Okay, let's keep going. So for stage 4, challenger safety, what do we need? We need high levels of intellectual friction accompanied by low levels of social friction. If the social friction rises as the intellectual friction rises, at some point, it will shut down the intellectual friction. So who's responsible for that? Well, everybody is, but the leader plays a special role, right? By virtue of positional power, you have to model the correct behavior, and you have to patrol, as I like to say, and I say it again and again, you have to patrol the boundaries of respect. We cannot allow personal attacks. If it goes personal, then the process collapses, it breaks down, and we're not productive anymore. We're not fruitful in what we're trying to accomplish. We take away every level of psychological safety. If the social friction keeps going, we take away inclusion safety, we take away learner safety, we take away contributor safety, and finally, we certainly take away challenger safety. It's gone.
Long gone.
It's gone. Okay. All right. So let's talk about paternalism and exploitation. Very fascinating patterns. We call these the 2 primary failure patterns. So as you're moving through the progression of the 4 stages of psychological safety, you can get off track. And you can get off track on this upper left area. So just think of the 4 stages as a bowling lane. You can go into the gutter on the left side of the bowling lane, and this area is called paternalism. Now notice the combination. Paternalism is a combination of relatively high respect, but low permission. So that's the pattern. High respect, low permission. It's an interesting pattern. We call it paternalism because leaders that are paternalistic, they act like helicopter parents. They pat you on the head. They tell you they love you. Don't touch anything, right? We love you. Just don't touch anything. So paternalism is a strange failure pattern where many leaders who are paternalistic are well-intentioned. They're benevolent, good people, but they're still micromanaging their people, right? How many of you have ever had, go to the chat box, how many of you have ever had a paternalistic boss, a fundamentally good person, well-meaning person, high integrity person, but nevertheless said, I love you, don't touch anything, right? Someone says, living this now, but we won't name names, right? Okay. Right? Yes. I have. A lot of
yeses.
And chances are, in the course of professional life, you will have an opportunity, that maybe is the wrong word, you'll have an opportunity to have a paternalistic boss.
Yeah.
What motivates a paternalistic boss to keep on doing this, exhibiting this pattern? Especially when a person has the demonstrated ability to not be micromanaged. So why do they do this? Why do we keep doing this? Okay, fear.
Not speaking up. Need to feel in charge.
Yeah.
I want to call out a previous comment too. Moshimi said there was a loss of direction in his absence. Yeah, what do you think is in the best interest of the organization? Surely not paternalism, because what happens with micromanagement when it leaves?
Yeah.
Nothing. People just sit there waiting to be given instructions.
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going. Paternalism. Okay, we just explained this. Have you ever had a boss that was paternalistic? Most of you have. Okay, let's go to the second question. What are the consequences of paternalism? Very important to discuss this question. What are the consequences?
Dependency.
Stagnation. Psychologists call out 2 concepts. They're related: dependency and learned helplessness. Stagnation, loss of creativity. Oh, I love this. Hibernation. That's a good one, Junior.
Yep, I like that a lot.
Oh, look at this. This forever a child.
Yeah.
Beautiful comment.
Well, and it goes right along with the literal interpretation of what paternalism or maternalism is.
That's right.
Right? Forever children.
Yeah. Emotional constipation. Oh, okay.
There you go.
No
accountability.
Your potential. Less resiliency.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. What happens when you encounter some pretty stiff adversity? What are you going to do then?
High turnover. Yeah. We haven't talked about that, but it's absolutely the case. And we've spoken about this previously, but I think there's increasingly less tolerance, or should I say decreased tolerance, for that type of behavior, especially among high performers. Because what do A players and high performers do when they hit an environment like this, especially today? They leave. Right? They say, I'm not putting up with that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Junior. I don't think high performers these days, especially among millennials, I don't think they look around and say, I'm going to try to change this.
No.
That's too big, right? That's too ambitious.
No, it's too ambitious, especially when you're just entering an organization. And if you're not at the tippy top,
Yeah.
forget about it.
Yeah. I just don't think they have the patience or the tolerance for that. I'm coming in to be a reformer. I'm coming in to be a change agent. If they
Yeah.
encounter a culture of paternalism, I
Yeah.
think they're going to bounce.
I think so. Well, and it's a reasonable thing to do, regardless of who you are and regardless of how talented you are, because the realistic thing is that the environment is not going to change,
Yeah.
especially just by some new impetus, which is you.
Yeah. Well, as Veronica says here, there's just too many options, right?
You're
There's
right.
too many options. Yeah, it's good. Okay. Let's keep going. Exploitation. This is the other failure pattern, right? So the bowling lane is to move through the 4 stages. If you go into the gutter on the right side of the bowling lane, you're going to go into exploitation. Now, notice the combination. The combination is the opposite: low respect and high permission. This is strange, but actually it's not when we think about it. Exploitation means that I want the value that you are able to create or produce, but I don't value you. So I want to extract the value. So the reason there's high permission is I'm giving you permission to create value because I know you can create value and I'm interested in the value.
Yeah.
But I'm not interested in your inherent value as a human being. Isn't that an interesting pattern?
One of the things I want to point out is that both of these failure patterns aren't necessarily overt,
Right.
and they can be subtle. And that's an important point that I think a couple of you have called out, that it can be subtle, it can be non-obvious. And so you may get into a situation and not immediately bounce because you're not quite sure, but it ends up being manipulative or it ends up being paternalistic as you start to peel back the layers and crack it open.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So with both paternalism and exploitation, the expressions of these failure patterns can be very mild and subtle and light, all the way to severe and overt and just visibly destructive.
Yeah,
Right?
thanks, Brendan, for your comment. That was good.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point.
So I would like to see some of those examples. So what are some of the behaviors that you all have seen that are either paternalistic or maybe let's go with exploitative that
Yeah.
were maybe a little bit subtle? Let's
Yeah.
talk about exploitation specifically.
Let's see if we can get some of those.
Yeah. Because as you start to identify these, it becomes something that's addressable, right?
Yeah.
Taking credit for employees' ideas.
Okay, there's a good
100%.
one. Yeah.
100%.
Is that not an expression of exploitation?
It absolutely
Sure it is.
Well, and Thomas makes an important addition. So he says claiming the credit, not claiming the mistakes. Happens all the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh, here's one. This is really interesting from Chris. Touting a family culture within an organization, but challenging is perceived as disloyal.
Yeah.
So right. So you
exclusive.
can't challenge that, right?
Yeah.
And you're either part of it or you're not part of it. Or you're part of the royal family or you're not part of the royal family. Sorry.
Okay, here's one I see all the time. Jules says dangling a promotion or bonus, but then moving the goalposts mid-project. Is that not exploitation?
Yeah, it is.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. That's tough. That's really, really tough.
Yep. Goalposting. Yeah, a lot of people can agree with that. Okay, this one's interesting, and I'm gonna touch on this. So Temeka says the sudden push to hear from marginalized populations if they were not viewed as sources of information previously. Mm-hmm. We see that sometimes where initiatives like that are disingenuous, which is why it's so important to encourage and build and foster inclusion safety from the get-go.
Yeah.
You can't just come back after all of this has been done and say, "Oh, we're 180 in one day."
Yeah.
Right?
Did you look at Aaron's? I worked for a paternalistic leader for almost 6 years. It didn't really become an issue until I was at a place on the team where I had reached challenger safety. Once I was feeling comfortable in sharing my true thoughts and pushing back, our relationship completely changed. And he couldn't handle me and always shut me and my ideas down. Okay, so this brings up a really good point. If you have a relationship that cannot withstand candor, candid feedback, challenge, then at some point you kind of have to question the nature of the relationship, don't you?
Yeah.
Because the best relationships can withstand challenge. They can withstand candor. So that's a really, really interesting point. And Aaron, that's a tough one. That's a really, really tough one. Sounds as if the insecurity really kind of took over at some point.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for your comments. We're going to move on now.
Okay. Okay. So we've kind of gone through all of those questions. So here's kind of the parting thought. And I hope that this will wrap up our entire discussion today in a fairly effective way. As a leader, you either lead the way or get in the way. You are never neutral. Now, why is that? Well, if you have a formal managerial role, then by virtue of your positional power, you're always front and center. You're radiating influence, and there's no off switch for that influence. There's no off switch. You can't come to work tomorrow and say, I don't want to radiate influence today. I'll do it the next day. I'm going to take the day off. That's not how it works. By virtue of your position, you're either leading the way or getting in the way. So I just want to leave you with that thought and hope that you'll reflect on that. And it's not limited to just having positional power. Every member of the team, to a certain extent, is playing this same role. We are influencing each other, and it's this reciprocal influence that goes on every day. You're never neutral. You can't be neutral. Junior, anything to add to that?
No.
Okay. Okay, then with that, Junior, I'll just turn it over to you to kind of wrap it up.
Sounds great. Well, first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today, for giving us an hour of your time. We know that an hour is precious. Time is currency. And so thank you for spending time with us today. We hope that it was valuable to you. A couple things that I would like to share with you just by way of information. Of course, the book, if you haven't had an opportunity to read the book, highly recommend it. Second, we have certifications in the 4 stages of psychological safety. Many of you on this, I believe, have been certified. We have a few upcoming sessions that still have seats available. October is sold out, but we have 2 sessions that are open for November. You can learn more about them at leaderfactor.com/certifications. That allows you admin access inside the 4 stages team survey platform, all of our decks, all of the facilitation materials and supporting assets, logos, all of those things are available to you through the certification. We also have an EQometer certification, which is our emotional intelligence tool. That is a session that still has seats available in October, so you can check that out as well. So a few things. We have a giveaway. There will be 8 winners. So if you've hung around with this long, you have a chance to win something pretty cool. So 8 winners will win a digital copy of the book, and 1 winner will win a live virtual session on the 4 stages of psychological safety. It's going to be a half-hour overview of the 4 stages hosted by Dr. Clark with your team. One-on-one team with Dr. Clark on the 4 stages. How do you enter? Post on LinkedIn about your experience on today's webinar. Tag Leader Factor and use the hashtag psychological safety. So I'll have Ben put those instructions in the chat if they're not there already. But that helps the content get out there so that everybody has an opportunity to get this material. We think that it's so important, especially with the way that the world is today. Another thing that we've seen is that people that join these webinars, people that sign up for the certifications, you're opting into this content, which is a cool thing because it means you value people, you value humanity, and we value you for that. It's such a cool
You
community
do.
to be a part of when you can think and be and ask questions with like-minded people who have the same goals as you. Leader Factor's mission is to improve the world and do good at scale. And that's what we're trying to do with these webinars and with the certifications, and you all are a part of that. So that's it from my end. I know we're at the top of the hour. Tim, any parting words?
No, that's it. Thanks so much for joining us. And we hope that you have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.